Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a couple seconds to allow other attendees to join this webinar. Okay, we'll kick it off. Hello, my name is Anna, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director for Constituent Relations to welcome you all to this 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, we just like to remind you that this is being recorded and it will be available on csulb.edu/alumni afterwards, where we'll post it on our YouTube library. Once it's posted, feel free to share it with a friend, fellow alumni, or someone that you know that may benefit from this chat. We also encourage you to utilize the Q&A. My colleague Rosalinda will be helping moderate the chat during this webinar. We would also like to promote CSU Voices. CSU Voices is Cal State University's advocacy community that keeps CSU alumni informed of the issues shaping the future of the CSU system. By taking simple actions like sending messages to elected leaders, you can influence state and federal policy decisions that affect students, campuses, and communities. Join CSU Voices and protect access, affordability, and the value of a CSU degree. We'll drop the link in the chat for more info, and if you would like to sign up, we encourage you to do that. And now I would like to introduce you to our alumni host, Krystian Lahage. Welcome. Before we start the questions, I'll just quickly read your bio. So Krystian is the Mojave Desert Land Trust's Public Policy Officer, responsible for managing the organization's engagement with elected officials and development of policy strategies. Krystian comes from the public sector, where he most recently served as the Legislative Affairs Manager for the County of Orange, responsible for policy concerning public lands, water, and infrastructure. In that role, he helped lead development of the county's first climate action plan. Krystian also served as U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein's senior field representative for Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties, and co-led her California wildfire task force. He is an avid desert lover, and he could be found camping with his dog Jezebel when he is not catching up on the latest current events. Krystian, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome. If there's anything I had missed, please feel free to, introduce yourself further.
Oh, no, that was a great introduction. I just wanted to say hello to everyone and thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you all about how my journey started with Long Beach. So just can't wait to get started. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Anna.
Well, kicking off with that, so, the first question is, what, led to your experience of choosing Cal State Long Beach? And can you kind of just share that background a little?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. It's quite different from what I ended up doing, but I grew up loving watching Animal Planet, and I lived in Huntington Beach, grew up surfing, and loved all of that. I wanted to be a marine biologist, and so obviously grew up watching Shark Week, knew the connection to the
Yeah,
college
Shark
with
Lab.
that. I love sharks; are still my favorite animal. And so I actually applied to Long Beach because I wanted to be a marine bio major and see the shark lab. But I ended up kind of having that realization I think a lot of us have that what we thought we wanted to do is different. And I ended up kind of going into history and geography, and it opened up a whole new world for me.
Wonderful. Wow, yeah. Total shift compared to, studying marine biology, that type of sector. And so
Totally.
whenever you kind of made that determination of, studying those fields, what was your student experience like as well at Cal State Long Beach? Did you work somewhere on campus? Were you part of any clubs?
Yeah, I was part of clubs. I worked off campus. I actually worked at a surfboard factory and at an Italian restaurant at the same time.
Nice.
But but in terms of clubs that I was in, I was part of the Intelligence Community Centers for Academic Excellence, which was a national security focused program. And it was an awesome experience. I had so many professors that took me under their wing and like, took their personal time to connect me to possible career choices and things like that. Through that program, I was able to go to DC for 2 weeks and meet with a bunch of government agencies and do like simulations and things like that. And I also got to go to Cambridge in the UK
Oh, wow.
as part of that program. So just totally invaluable and was the thing that really solidified what I wanted to do, even if I didn't end up doing exactly that.
Very cool. Didn't even know we had that club on campus. And so, can you kind of also explain what originally drew you to advocacy work? Was it,
Yeah,
if you want to
so
touch upon more from that, be super
continuing off
interesting.
of that trail, so I wanted, at the time, I was looking at national security or intelligence work. And so, but I lived here in California, and most of that happens over in DC, and I
Mhm.
wasn't moving anytime soon. So I looked up whatever the closest thing I could find was, and I was looking up elected officials that had a role on the Intelligence Committee. And that's how I saw that Senator Dianne Feinstein had an internship. And so I actually used that internship for some of my classes, which was really cool. And professors were really flexible and made it so that I could take that opportunity, which was awesome. And so I went in thinking, okay, I want to learn about the intelligence portion of this, but then I really ended up loving the public service end of it and seeing the kind of both impact of direct work in the community, but also seeing like, oh, there are a lot of problems that I'd like to be a part in fixing. So it was a really cool experience that I think was shifted me almost instantly to going, nope, this is what I want to do.
Oh, wow. And was that your first job out of college, working with her office?
First, like job related to my degree, certainly. Like I said, I worked a bunch of odd jobs throughout the time up until I graduated. But that was my first. Yeah, I did an internship while I was still in my senior year, and then when I returned after summer from my Cambridge study abroad, I got a full-time job there.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So it sounds like it was more of an intentional, journey for you to pursue that career field post
Yes,
graduation. And so
yeah, absolutely. It had solidified by graduation for sure.
awesome. And then during that time, what did kind of like a typical day look like in that position?
Yeah, so I think it was invaluable, and I still tell this to everyone that wants to get into policy, even if you don't want to work in politics.
Mhm.
But working in an elected office, it was exciting, right? I mean, this was, let's see, 2016, 2017 were the years that I was doing this. So there was a lot going on, Supreme Court nominations, things like that. So the typical day, and I'll say this many times, which is a little frustrating, but there's not really a typical day in policy. Sure, there's things
Mhm.
where, in that entry level experience, it was answering a lot of calls, but also preparing responses to things that anything that constituents, people who that representative serves, it was basically assisting them. So doing things like casework with veterans or immigration and things like that. So you just meet so many different people. And so every day is kind of fresh in that there's always a new issue in policy. There's always so many people with different perspectives where you're hearing things. So yeah, just really exciting to get to do that and be around other people that also come from these different backgrounds and have slightly, differing beliefs and views.
Right.
And really just working together through all of that was an awesome experience. And then you get to put on these bigger political events where you're going and preparing for whether it be a fundraiser or just a town hall or something like that. And the energy is so exciting. But also when you really get to get wins, that's when it pays off for sure.
Amazing. And so during that time also, how would you say working for her office shaped your approach to advocacy and coalition building?
That's a great question. So, Senator Feinstein was certainly a moderate, but she was one of those people that really believed in what she was doing. She knew as much as we did about the stuff that we were analyzing. But she always had at the heart of anything she did, she wanted to know what people on the other side were doing and how she could get them on her side as well.
Mhm.
It was never always just, I'll go forward with this on my own and like we can force it through. It was always very meticulous coalition building, always very meticulous, making sure that you're acting in good faith. and just a really well-run machine that respected, respected bipartisan, respected that we're all in this together basically,
Right.
and we need to do it. So that's something that stuck with me the whole time, and how I try to approach building coalitions is it should involve people from all backgrounds
Right.
if we really want to get things done.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And kind of also talking about some of your other experience, what was the most challenging part of leading the development of the County of Orange's first climate action plan? And how did you overcome some of those obstacles?
Yeah, so that was probably one of the accomplishments I'm still the most proud of. So this came at the time that there were massive kind of climate funding packages coming out of the government. So that was
Mhm.
the Inflation Reduction Act, if folks recall that. And it had large funds for specifically creating these climate action plans. And so one of our jobs in the county is to never leave money on the table, meaning that you go and if there's money available to better serve our constituents, that we're going to go and get it. And one of that was for a large program that would allow counties to make climate action plans. And so it's a pretty serious undertaking because we had to mobilize all of the departments to share carbon numbers, things like that.
Mhm.
But then from the kind of coalition and advocacy side, there are still folks have a spectrum of belief in climate change, right? And how willing they are to take action on it. So we had to build a coalition, convince the folks that maybe were climate skeptics, that, this investment is going to allow us to do things we're going to do anyway, and to bring in those engineers and the folks that were saying, no, this is a good thing, no matter what you think about it. So there were a lot of folks that we had to kind of convince that this was the right move. And then it also required us to partner with the County of Los Angeles for that grant. So there was a very big coalition building here with different interests. You often hear about the Orange County, LA bumping heads. So navigating all of that was really interesting, but also I think at that core again, operating in good faith and making sure to include as many folks from varied views
Right.
made it a lot easier to do things folks were uncomfortable with if they had been communicated well about it beforehand. So, after about a year, and I was working with the deputy CEO of the county on this, we really just kind of coordinated agency to agency to get these numbers and to coordinate with our partners.
Amazing. And what were some of like the successes that came out of that plan? Can you share any
Yeah,
details of what that
so
looks like?
that it awarded $500 million to the county for the development of it. So the John Wayne Airport is a part of the County of Orange, like they run
Mhm.
and operate it, which is a little unusual for how airports are operated, but that meant, that's a serious kind of source of carbon in the county. So
Mhm.
the airport was able to figure in some of those numbers and start taking plans to basically, and multiple agencies across the county were able to start looking at programs that they wanted to implement to start reducing those numbers that would also save money. So, for example, at the airport, rather than the diesel fueled shuttles, they moving to an early electric or other
Oh,
renewable,
gotcha. Mhm.
kind of making sure all the county buildings are LEED certified and things like that. Evaluating whether recycled concrete can be used in certain projects where it's allowed. So it really allowed us to take all these projects that agencies were thinking about doing and then all of a sudden have this funding to actually do them.
Right. Implement it. Sometimes
Yeah,
it just takes the money
exactly.
to make
People
it
have great
happen.
ideas. We're just limited by time and money.
Right. Wonderful. Well, sounds crazy that, you helped spearhead that initiative and they were able to get those resources they needed.
Yeah,
I've yet to fly out
that's
of that airport, but I've picked up plenty of people and they love it.
it's 100 feet shorter than a normal runway, so it's a very steep
Oh,
takeoff.
wow. Did not know that. And so my next question is, can you describe a time when you had to adapt your analysis based on new information or data? So, especially with new current trends, AI, how do you stay current with all of those new changes that might be happening in policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there's a few different answers to this. The first is that you have to be talking to other people. And obviously as you enter into a career here, you're surrounded by these types of folks. And I just, partner organization stuff like that. I just call to check in and see what they're hearing because so often we hear conflicting things, especially nowadays, where, there's always, if something happens, the media is going to jump on it. And depending on what your
Right.
ideology is, you're going to be told something different. So the main thing that I do is there are objective sources, right? Where my first idea is if I'm looking at a bill that I need to analyze, I'm going to read just the bill the first time. But the best and most accurate way you can get a picture of it is to read everything. Doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative or whatever, you should be reading the media that is targeted at both because somewhere in between all of that lies objective truth. Um, and so, but things do change constantly, and you need to be able to be flexible. And I'll say, like, out in our work right now in the desert, we've been working on national monuments out here and protecting them.
Right.
And we kind of will get these conflicting reports of so and so is on board for this, and Congressman so and so is on board. And then the next week we get actually he just sent a letter to one of his constituents saying he opposes it. So you have to go and kind of work backwards, but also be sensitive that, you're working with these folks with a lot of authority and things like that, and you need to have a working relationship. So you
Right.
have to kind of gently broach, and that's a totally acceptable thing to do as well, is just go, hey, we heard this, but you told us this, and oftentimes it turned out to be that it was just an old draft letter before he had changed his policy on it. So
Oh, wow.
you have to
Interesting.
always just be adaptive and not afraid to just reach out, pick up the phone, and talk to folks. That's how I reinforce what I read online, basically, is to make sure I'm evaluating it in the real world as well.
Yeah, and using a little detective Sherlock Holmes skills as well, it sounds
Yeah.
nice. Okay. And again, kind of going back to working with Feinstein's office, can you share any exciting work you did in co-leading her wildfire task force?
Yeah, so and this kind of connects to my desert love as well. I love the outdoors and public lands are my favorite thing. And so I would already had an interest. Whenever the senator had some activity involving fires, I was just volunteering for it. And so the first
Mhm.
experience I had with that, just to give you an idea, I'll say being a field representative is the coolest job in the world because you just get to go do a bunch of random stuff and people are inviting you all the time to come do it. And then a few years later, you realize, oh, I got a bunch of skills out of that. It wasn't just fun and
Right.
interesting, but I gained a lot of knowledge. Uh, and so, uh, one of the instances that I got asked was to go participate in a controlled burn up in Santa Barbara County. So, for a prescribed burn. So,
Right.
that's when the firefighters intentionally set a fire basically in an area to prevent a bigger, larger wildfire from running through. And at the
Mhm.
time, there's a lot of debate on those because they concern communities. They're afraid that they might get out of control.
Mhm.
So I was asked to go up there and share what my opinion was after spending a day out there doing it. And I was so nervous that I was going to start a wildfire and
Oh
be
my
like
God, I'm
right
sorry.
on the news. But no, it ended up being a very safe practice that I ended up going, okay. And so I started being really interested in different wildfire innovations. So we visited a number of universities to see what type of AI modeling they were using.
Hmm.
The County of Orange was working with some advanced AI modeling as well. So it really got me into this world. And obviously in California, we just see so many and more
Right.
wildfires. And
Yeah.
being that what I do now is protecting public lands, it's heartbreaking to, celebrate protecting thousands of acres and then watch a wildfire destroy 300,000 acres. Um,
Instantly.
so
Yeah.
I would go visit a lot of these things. A big part of my role there was to make sure that firefighters had the resources they needed. So that would be like if we needed to, using the senator's authority to get National Guard involved or additional aircraft involved, things like that, and kind of really making sure that the firefighters felt like they had federal support behind them.
Nice. Yeah, and additional resources just to prepare and prevent in case those, uh, controlled burns may have gone a little out of control.
Yeah,
And but that sounds exciting, being able to go and experience that yourself. Not many people might be
absolutely.
able to ever have that type of experience, which I'm sure is very intimidating, as you mentioned.
Yes, especially around a bunch of firefighters who do it every day, but it was really cool.
Yeah, they're like having this other person come in and, have to show them the ropes, make sure
Yes.
they're not messing it up.
Yeah, but they appreciated it as long as you get your hands dirty.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. And so how do you define success for a policy initiative that sometimes, may take many years to achieve and, show those measurable results?
That's a really good question. And I think it's one of the things that folks that get into policy have to kind of come to terms with pretty early on is that policy moves slowly. If you're working at the federal level, it moves like a glacier. If you're working at the state level, things actually do move because there's a more ordered schedule and there's a supermajority, so things move. But in the federal Congress, it takes a very long time, and the things that do move only move because they have broad coalition support behind them. And so, as I mentioned, the national monuments we've been working on, one of the things that we helped accomplish last year was the designation of Chuckwalla, which was the California's newest national monument, like 600,000 acres. So we're talking bigger than Joshua Tree National Park. Um, but that is a effort that began years earlier, and actually I was a part of when I was with the Senators team.
Mm,
So that's something that's been, people thought about more than 10 years ago and slowly built up. So while I was on the other side in the Senate, I was one of those people they were trying to bring in for support. And as I came over to the nonprofit side, it was continuing to build support with local Congress people. But also looking at the federal agenda, which is very opposed to things like this currently, and figuring out how we were going to get around that. And it involved, measuring these successes in the short run was each new person we pulled in that had a view different from us. That was a victory, right? We knew that this was going to be a long fight, so but each more conservative elected that
mhm,
typically didn't support, national monument designations. Each time we got them on board, or each business we got on board, or each veterans group we got on board, those were how we marked the progress because we knew that the coalition was the biggest thing behind it.
mhm.
Because you need to demonstrate public support. If you want folks to change their mind from what they're currently set on doing, they need to know that their constituents don't agree
We're
with it.
behind it. Right.
And that not just their constituents from one party, but their constituents broadly,
Mhm.
support or do not support something. So that's what one of the ways I measure it. I also think that getting the community involved is a way that I personally measure success. It's one of those things I think we all grow up realizing like, wow, we don't learn a lot about how our government works unless we go and specifically choose to do so. Um,
Right.
and so one of the things I'm doing right now are these community advocacy trainings of just teaching folks in the community like what advocacy is, how they can get started. I'm not telling them what to say or how to vote or do anything like that, but just informing them. And the engagement in our own community is already growing so much, and seeing people like have the confidence to get involved is a way that also feels really rewarding to me.
Yeah, that kind of leads to another question where for those that, students or alumni that do want to make that impact, but are intimidated, by politics and what's going on in the world, what are some ways you can say is an easy intro to get civically engaged?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great question. What I say to the initial folks is, I think we're all into everything going on, right? As policy nerds, like we're into it all. But whatever your specialties are, start following some groups that handle things like that, whether that's nonprofits, foundations, whatever it may be, because they put up things like action alerts and things like that, which I kind of say are like the entry level into advocacy, right?
Mhm.
Typically, you're just pressing a few buttons, modifying the message that gets sent to an elected or something like
Right.
that. But as you kind of get more confident about learning what the issues are and things like that, I think get involved in a local group that's affiliated with your associations. This
Mhm.
is the other thing I'll tell you is elected officials, it is their job to listen to you. You don't need to be a wonderful public speaker. You don't need to be, the most polished presenter in the world. It's their job to listen to you. If you request a meeting on something that is actually relevant to what they do, they're obligated to have either their staff or them meet with you. That
Mhm.
so it's the what am I going to say when I get there, right? That a
Right.
lot of people I think struggle with. And I tell people this, it's so tempting to kind of come in and just regurgitate the talking points you see on CNN or Fox or NBC, whatever your news source
Mhm.
is, right? But they've already heard all of that a million times over. Their staff has prepared analysis for that. They know what the talking points are. You can make an impact with your personal story and whatever your experience is with something, that speaks so much louder. When we work in Congress, we look to find anecdotes like that to share on the Senate floor. No one's going to come and read, 2 pages of statistics and change hearts and minds. It doesn't work like that. I'll say out here, just for folks that are skeptical of it, if you're skeptical that folks that you disagree with can change, even if they do things that you really disagree with in other areas, you need to come in with a singular focus on the one issue you want to focus on. We had out here in the desert, at least 3 members of the state legislature who would typically be opposed to it end up becoming champions for this. And it's because we got their constituents to get out there and talk to them and to
Right.
share how much they loved and how important these things were. You don't need to come, you can come in and give a minute comment. Um, Easy ways, if you really want to dip your toes in the water, is all of your congressional and state representatives have phone lines that are open all day, every day, pretty much. You can just call and give a basic comment. You're usually talking to an entry-level staffer, so there's a little less pressure.
Right.
Um, but the thing is, it's not just a one and done. You do these progressively over time, and that's how you can see in the responses you get what type of progress you're making. But always I say get involved with local groups because especially right now, they put on a lot of opportunities to get engaged with engagement. And so whatever your interest, if it's public lands, if it's immigration, if it's whatever it may be, find a group that does that and ask their volunteer coordinator how you can get involved. It's a great way because it's really nice when someone else can facilitate invitations to a congressional meeting and you
Mhm.
have a kind of guide in there who's done it before, but you can certainly do it on your own as well.
Yes, all great touch points, especially those whole copy and paste and send that email to your representative. Yeah, great,
Yep.
great first step to try to get involved. And now fast forwarding to kind of the work that you're doing at the Mojave Desert, what's kind of like your usual day look like now? And
Yeah.
also, with AI kind of transforming the way industries work, does your office utilize any AI tools with some of their policies?
Sure. So I work for the Mojave Desert Land Trust, which is a nonprofit out in Joshua Tree. Our service area is the entire deserts of California. So that's from the border at Mexico all the way up to just above Death Valley. I do our policy work. So my day to day does not look as that different from where it's been before. I'm just on the other side of the coin now. But one of the interesting things is historically, I've worked with a bunch of other policy people. I now work with a lot of scientists, a lot of botanists, a lot of folks who are more, work in the field and do our acquisition work. So I should go back up a little bit and say what we do. So we acquire public or private lands from willing buyers that are within the boundaries of national parks, national monuments, wilderness, wildlife corridors. We restore them and then we convey them for permanent protection by either the National Park Service or the Bureau of Land Management. And we also do a bunch of seed banking to ensure that if there's devastating wildfires, we can grow plants back with the
Okay,
DNA
cool.
from the actual area they came from, as well as a bunch of education and other things. And all of the programs that we do are tied to working with the federal government. And at the top of last year, I believe in February, there was an attempt by the federal administration to prohibit nonprofits from working with the federal government anymore in our sector, and several other things like that. So, I always tried not to be blatantly political or anything like that, but this administration has taken a toll on nonprofits and how we can operate. Um, and so it has been pretty nonstop since January of last year. We received
Mm.
the designation of the national monument on President Biden's last week in.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned, it was a 10-year campaign there, so wish it came a little
Wow.
earlier. But yeah, it crossed the line there, and we were able to go to the White House for the signing, which was awesome. And then a week later, we were fighting for, in many cases, the survival of programs, of grants, of
Mhm.
staffing positions. So my role as the policy person has been quite intense, but I love it because I'm getting to work in my favorite place, the desert. Right now, I am really responsible for building coalitions. The thing is that public lands are one of the few things that I think a lot of folks still agree on in our country. No matter what you like doing on public lands, whether that's hunting, fishing, hiking, backpacking, birding, whatever it is, folks come from different backgrounds, and we all agree that these are a core part of our identity.
Hmm.
And so my job is to go out and find folks that use these public lands, and maybe they're not as conservation minded, and to bring them into the fold of conservation, but also to give something reciprocal back, to teach them about the desert, to teach them about how they can be better stewards.
Right.
And together we can actually end up protecting these larger areas like we did with Chuckwalla. By keeping the state's allowance of hunting there, we were able to get hunters and anglers onto something that they might not typically support. So there's ways to bring folks in. In other instances, we've worked with the renewable energy industry to get additional funding or to help that basically they're mitigating for something they've done, and so
Hmm.
they'll help fund it. So my job day to day looks like meeting with a bunch of different partners across the state. I am a lead for 4 different congressional targets for our coalition, meaning I come up with the strategies. I work with our partners to kind of put them in action, and we kind of periodically check, as you were referencing earlier, what our progress is, how many new folks are we bringing in? And then we try to take these strategic moments that will happen every once in a while where either we hear the administration is going to do something or some action is going to be taken, and we'll unite that entire coalition and activate them. We're not just doing action alerts every day. We do them around specific time events. So that might be, the DOJ shares a memo that the president can eliminate national monuments with unilaterally. Okay, well, time to activate all of the Republican Congress members that we have that are willing to reach out to the president directly and tell him, please don't.
Hmm.
Um, that is kind of how the day to day goes. Of course, it's always a different issue, but it's really exciting. A lot more time to get spent on public land too. Going back to the idea of the personal story and people's connections with issues,
Right.
I get a lot of chances to bring electeds out onto the public lands, and it's really cool to watch them kind of go from the very stiff demeanor into just relaxed and actually willing to talk. We also do a lot of work with tribes, are involved in some of the land back things and talking about doing some of that ourselves as a land trust, because historically that's been, something that has not been addressed, and I think we're
Right.
trying to get better at doing. And the national monument, as I mentioned, is also ancestral homeland and ceremonial place for a lot of those tribes. So that was definitely a new experience for me from either of my other two, because there's at least at the county there was not a federally recognized tribe in the area to consider
Mm-hmm.
and things, and they're sovereign nations for all intents and purposes. So the interaction is very different from how you interact with another county or another government.
Right. Wow, very cool. A lot of moving parts. It seems like
Yes,
it's going a lot
but that's what
faster
makes it
here.
fun.
Yeah, compared to some previous roles. And one question that we just got was if you could wave a magic wand and
Yeah.
fix one broken thing about how the US handles public land policy, what would that be?
Fund our public land agencies and fully staff them. Almost every year for the past decades, Bureau of Land Management,
Hmm.
National Park Service, Department of Interior, and EPA get defunded. To give you an instance of what happened this year, so far, the National Park Service, sorry, I'm counting 2025, we're in 2026 now. Since January of last year, the National Park Service has lost more than a quarter of its staff, whether that's fired, forced retired, or other. They've lost hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. There was a proposal in the budget last year that would have made 300 national parks in our country insolvent, basically made them unable to actually operate because of the staffing levels.
Oh, wow.
Out here in San Bernardino County, where I am, folks, there's a lot of ability to damage the land out here because we don't have the resource managers out here. There are 2 law enforcement rangers for an area that's the size of some states. So your chances of seeing them when you're in trouble or someone is damaging or, running over tortoise habitat or something like that, it's very low. And uh, this is not a one-party issue. Currently, right now, it's certainly worse. But this has been a thing where folks kind of, we fund other areas or other things become priorities and just chip away slowly at our funding and our staffing for those folks. So I'd say that's the number one priority, to ensure that what we've already protected stays protected.
Yeah, thanks for making those real points and sharing that. And, kind of thinking now in the future, what are some long-term career goals you have, with being a public policy officer? Or do you see yourself even growing more somewhere else within the government?
I'll say I love my position right now. I'm kind of in a weird nestled away position in the nonprofit. So I have a lot of autonomy to engage on the issues that I want to, as long as I'm advancing our both our organization and our coalition's missions. I love the desert. This was my dream job. I worked with this organization when I was working with the senator. So it was somewhere that I always wanted to end up.
Oh, nice.
And as much as I talk about how challenging it's been this past year, it's also felt really rewarding to be a part of defending these things. So, at the moment right now, my thought is more on how I can make more of the desert whole through policy
Hmm.
work, and whether that's here, there, or anywhere is not really a big deal to me. But there's something called it's basically the Mojave to Moab connection, and if you guys can take a look at this later and see some maps, but we have some of the most relatively intact landscape left in the country. Like outside of Alaska, basically, from here all the way to Moab in Utah.
Wow.
And that's because we've actually protected big pieces of land, wildlife corridors, but there's still a lot left to do there.
Hmm.
And so I would love to see by the time I am retired that a mountain lion can walk down from Big Bear, cross the highway on an overpass, and then migrate its way all the way to Utah, should it so desire.
That
So
would be crazy.
that that's what the type of things I would like to see, and kind of how I think about it. I'm definitely mission driven.
Yeah, amazing. I love that passion. And now, kind of speaking to some students or alumni, like what are some of the best ways to find opportunities for folks that are looking to kind of get started in this type of industry?
Yeah, I have to give a shout out back to the congressional internships. And guess what? They're actually paid nowadays. They weren't when I was one.
Nice.
So every single congressional office hires interns. And it's usually something that's really conducive to a college working schedule. I became an intern manager when I worked for the senator, and it was one of my favorite jobs, because I felt like I got to pay it forward, but also just
Mhm.
seeing so much of the kind of energy of the next generation coming in has been so cool. So go to findmyrep.gov and look up who your rep is, and go to their intern page on their website. They don't need to be someone, and I can't stress this enough. Don't go work for someone you completely disagree with, but don't go and find the one thing that you disagree with and find that as a reason not to.
Mhm.
One of the questions you're going to get asked on that interview, I guarantee it, is what would you do if you disagree with what the senator or what the congressman, what their stance is? And the answer is that you're basically working at the pleasure of that person. And so you're representing their views, not yours. Your views don't have to change to work for these folks.
Good
But
point.
don't go look for something perfect, because it doesn't exist. We all have little nuances and differences in our political beliefs. Go take a look at those internships. Or take a look at nonprofits as well. It's great other mission driven people there to learn from. But I absolutely believe it's invaluable to have, if you're going to work in advocacy, it's so valuable to know what the other side of it looks like. And so even if that's just an internship for a little bit to get a good idea, I learned so much during that internship about how the government is shaped, how to do, if a veteran has this issue, who do I need to talk to?
Right.
If a bill is doing this, all these little edge cases, and it made it really built a really solid foundation for everything that came after for me. So I have to say those types of internships, your local county, your local city, they also do these types of internships. So just call some city halls and see if they have any internships for undergrad students, and just absolutely recommend the internship as being crucial to both understand the culture of this type of work, but as well of whether you even like it before you get really into it.
Yeah, you get a little taste of it before you want to really launch yourself in that type of world.
Yeah.
Is mentorship also important on top of just trying to get an internship in this type of industry? And do you even have any mentors yourself? Have you mentored someone?
Yeah, yes to all of those things. So when I was at Long Beach State, I had a professor, Dr. Lassiter, who was kind of the one that connected me with government things at first. And so I feel I've had different mentors at kind of different stages.
Hmm.
When I got to Senator Feinstein's office, I was a bit younger in the field representative range, so I had a lot of folks that had been doing it for a bit longer, that I could learn from. And so that would be things like them taking me along, on theirs to see how they engage and do things like that,
Hmm.
to kind of share just various lessons that they had learned. And this is a job that is so different depending on where you're from, what your background is, and all of that. The work looks the same, but kind of what you bring to the table is different. And so I had really great mentors at Senator Feinstein's office that were always encouraging me to do the next thing, right? Like the wildfire task force. My
Hmm.
boss there had kind of really inspired me and guided me to get into that. Nowadays, I have a ton of mentors as well. Some great folks who have just, the legacy of the desert and the public lands out here goes back also to and before Feinstein, but in 94, she created the act that made Joshua Tree, Death Valley, and a bunch of the monuments out here. And so it's really cool to kind of get to follow that and now be talking to people who were working on the nonprofit side all those years ago and
Hmm.
start learning from them. And so one of my favorite things to do is go hike with some of those folks and just kind of learn from them, and hear their various insights on ask them what they think about what I'm doing right now and how it could, be more effective and things like that. So,
Right.
um, and then on the inverse, a lot of my former interns I still talk to. I've written countless, recommendations for,
Oh,
talked about
amazing.
interviews to and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I still try to do that here at my current position.
Hmm.
So I might be having an intern soon, which I'm excited about. So, um, I think it's absolutely important both to have a good network of peers as well as
Hmm.
mentors here. But it's a job where, again, being able to pick up the phone and ask someone what they heard about something is really invaluable. So, um, kind of both mentor relationships and peer relationships are really big deal.
Oh, good points. And what other advice do you have for our 49ers that, might be interested in making a career in this industry?
Yeah, be true to what you believe. Go do what you want to and what interests you as far as this is, and it'll be way easier to be passionate and to stay out of burnout.
Good
There's
point.
high intensity to this field for sure. But when you're really, really excited about what you're doing, like when I know, like, okay, I'm going to go protect this spot that I love hiking or taking my dog to or whatever, right? There's so much more of a personal investment in it. And I felt
Hmm.
that at other times too, certainly, but like there's other times where we all have interests, right? And so if you're kind of broadly being shoveled into things that might not be your interest, it's going to make it a lot harder to do this type of work. The second thing is just always act in good faith. The best thing you can do is have a reputation of of actual good faith, and that means actually engaging. There's a
Hmm.
difference between advocacy and activism. Activism is certainly a viable option in certain cases, but advocacy, where you're actually wanting to have a dialogue with someone, means you need to come to the table respectfully. And listen, I bite my tongue all the time, all the time. But the biggest thing you can do is when you're talking to, like, a congressional office, be polite. Those
Hmm.
staff didn't do anything to you. They're probably also, recent grads who are getting into this in the first time. Be nice
Yeah.
to folks because it makes such a big difference. I have been at a town hall where everyone was yelling at the Congress member. No one was saying anything. And I just walked up, had a polite conversation, and extracted everything I needed in about a minute because I was the one person not screaming.
Oh, yeah.
And so again, there are moments to scream. Don't take this as anything other than that. But when you are doing advocacy, you're making a conscious decision that I'm going in, I know who this person I'm talking to. I might disagree with certain things, but I'm going in and I'm trying to accomplish this set thing. That's all I'm going to talk about. And that's what I'm going to focus on. So just that type of very measured and balanced response and kind of being the voice of reason when either the elected or other constituents are not makes a miles of a difference. So bite your tongue when you have to, say your thank yous. I always tell people like if you really can't stand this person and you can't think of anything to thank them for meeting with you, right? That's still fine. It's showing good faith, but it makes a world of difference and people will want to work with you. And you need people to want to work with you when you're building
Right.
coalitions.
Yeah. Very good points. Great advice. Let me see if we have any other questions popped up before we start to wrap up. I think maybe just one final one. If you had a chance to, relive attending Cal State Long Beach, would you do anything differently knowing what you know now? Maybe not start as a marine bio major, but
Yeah, no, you know what? I wouldn't change that even. One of the really cool pieces of advice I got along my journey was actually when I was visiting one of those intelligence agencies, and they told me like, we don't want to just hire the straight like political science major, right? We want
Mhm.
bring something yourself. And you've heard me now say that mentioning in the narrative, right, of bringing your narrative to things.
Mhm.
Come with your own background. Like your unique journey will make you a different, if you end up doing political science, that kind of twisted path that you ended up to get there is going to bring different focuses and interests to what you end up doing. The same is true of me for history, like obviously marine biology was interesting to me, and I kind of still made my way back to an in between
Yeah, you're right.
some
Yeah.
form of natural history and policy. And so I wouldn't change anything because I think I ended up where I was supposed to end up. And I met so many great guides along the way, whether or not that's what I ended up doing, that still are lessons that I find applicable today. So no, I wouldn't change anything.
Amazing. Love that. Okay, well, looks like we don't have any other questions in our chat, so we will be wrapping up this call. So thank you so much, Krystian, for joining us today. Once again, everyone, this recorded session will be posted on our alumni website in the weeks ahead. So again, if you want to share this recording with anyone that you think would benefit from it, please do. And check out that CSU Voices initiative. So if you want to try to get your foot into advocacy, that might be a great start to kind of learn how that world works. And lastly, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn, and thank you and go beach.
Thank you.